Hi everyone, how are you all doing? Oh my God, I've missed you all so much. I am so sorry about the last 2 weeks. I have been having so many technical issues. So for those of you that don't know, just a brief summary of what I have been going through the last 2 weeks. So my Mac broke on me. That was during the last video that I uploaded. Somehow managed to fix it temporarily and get that video finished, but I didn't want to risk editing another video on that Mac. So I ordered a new Mac and then I just got the idea of changing all of my equipment at the same time. What a fool I was. Basically, my mic and my camera have been acting up a little bit recently, and the fact that my Mac just broke on me, I thought that that was a sign. I thought, you know what, I need to just replace all of my equipment because the camera that I am currently recording on, I have been filming on since 2015. It's an old camera and my mic is not the best, and I've been wanting to improve my quality, but I'm not very good with technology. I am 90 years old on the inside. So anyway, long story short, I got all of this new equipment. I got a new mic, a new camera, I got a new Mac, and I was doing tests with the camera, trying to get the right settings with the right mic. Nothing was going right. Nothing was working properly. So instead of changing everything at the same time, I'm going to slowly transition to my new equipment. So hopefully over the next coming videos, you will see an improvement in my quality. But things over the last couple of weeks have been very stressful because I don't know if I've ever actually said this, but I do everything myself. When it comes to these videos, I do it all myself. I don't have anyone working with me. I do have my husband working with me, but he handles like the business side of things and emails and talking to people and all stuff like that. But when it comes to these videos, I do everything myself, which I love. I am a little bit of a control freak, but when things go wrong, it's only me here to fix it, and that's very stressful. So that is what has been happening over the last couple of weeks. Very stressful. However, I did see Beyonce, so it wasn't all stressful, and that was like the best time ever because I am Beehive, by the way, if any of you didn't know. And then to top everything off, I got ill, and you can probably hear it in my voice. I am very congested. I feel very rough right now, but I could not miss another upload. I just couldn't. I couldn't. And that was a very long update. I'm really sorry for those of you that don't care. And I have picked probably one of my most confusing cases ever to do when I'm feeling so rough. So please excuse me if I pronounce things wrong or if I don't make sense. I don't know how I'm going to get through this video. But today we have a crazy case. Today we are going to be talking about the case of the Mauerova family, and this is one of those cases where it just doesn't feel real. Like, how the hell did this case happen? And this case has been requested. I have seen this requested quite a few times recently, and we are going to the Czech Republic today, continuing on my effort to try and do more international cases. So the Mauerova family was made up of a woman called Clara, her two sons Jakob and Andre, Clara's sister Katarina, and they were a nice little tight-knit family. And then all of a sudden, a 13-year-old girl called Anishka came into their lives, and everything becomes crazy. And if you've ever seen the movie Orphan, that movie was inspired by this case. I really don't know how I'm going to deliver this case. I really don't, because it is bizarre and it contains pretty much everything. It contains bizarre religious delusions, fake identities, mysterious doctors, cannibalism, and evil cults. Yeah, it is kind of a cult, today's case. It's not really a cult, but there is a cult that kind of comes into it. And unfortunately, I do have to give a very big warning for today's case. There is horrific child abuse, and I will give a warning before we get onto that in the case. But I will have to say, today's case is one of those cases where I actually had to take a break from when I was researching. I just had to put it to the side because it was that bad. But I do need to give a huge warning for today's case, and I will leave timestamps in the description box down below so you can skip over the child abuse if you don't want to hear about it. And we have a lot to get through. We really do. And today's case is just absolutely horrific, and it's heartbreaking and it's unbelievable. So let's jump in. I just want to give a huge thank you to today's sponsor, and that is Magellan TV. So you guys know how much I love Magellan TV. It is a documentary streaming service that literally has one of the largest collections of true crime documentaries of any streaming service. So if documentaries are your thing, then you need to check out Magellan TV. And one thing that I have been watching recently, which fascinates me so much, is a documentary called The Dyatlov Mystery. Now, I'm sure most of you have probably already heard about this case because it pretty much is one of the most famous unsolved true crime cases, mysteries. And this whole case blows my mind. But just in case if you're not aware, the Dyatlov Pass incident, and I always struggle to say that word, Dyatlov, is an unsolved mystery from 1959 in Russia. But basically there were 9 hikers out in the snowy mountains, and one night they went to set up camp, you know, settle down, and then something happened. And we don't know what happened because all 9 hikers went missing. They were eventually found, and pretty much all 9 hikers had very weird, unexplainable injuries. And I'm not going to tell you what the injuries are. Some of them are very gruesome, and all 9 bodies were just found in really weird positions. They were all frozen into the mountains. It's just weird and bizarre, and it's still unsolved to this day. There is no logical explanation that could explain what happened to these 9 hikers. And if you guys haven't heard of this case, that documentary is a must watch. Like, it is so good. Like, it really is so good. I was on the edge of my seat watching it, so literally go and watch it right now. Even if you think you know the case, go and watch the documentary anyway, because I knew about the case before watching it and I still found it fascinating. And best of all, Magellan TV are offering every single one of you a full 1 month free trial. And you can get that free trial by going to the link in my description box, which is try.magellantv.com/Danielle Kirsty. And if you are planning on getting a month free trial from Magellan, using that link in my description box really does help out this channel. So I would really appreciate it if you did click on that link and go and get your free 1 month trial of Magellan TV. And then you can go and start watching the Dyatlov mystery right now. Thank you again to Magellan TV for sponsoring today's video, but thank you to every single one of you watching right now, because truly without all of you guys, I wouldn't get opportunities like this. And now let's jump into today's case. And I am putting my hair up because it is way too hot. All of a sudden, it has decided to be summer in the UK, which I am not happy about. No. I like autumn and winter. I do not do well in the hot weather. Oh God, I feel like I've got so much vocal fry. I am so sorry. I am annoying myself. So there are a lot of people that we actually have to go through their background of, but we're going to start with Clara Mauerova. She was born on the 30th of January 1977, making her an Aquarius. And she grew up in the city of Brno, which is in the Czech Republic. And we have never been to the Czech Republic before. And Clara grew up with her parents and her 2 older siblings, her 2 sisters, Gabrielle and Katarina. And Katarina plays a very significant role in today's case. Katarina is the oldest out of the siblings, and she was born on the 7th of August 1973, making her a Leo. Now, growing up, it is said that the family were pretty close. They would go on day trips together. They would always be on vacation. Clara was said to be very sporty and outgoing, and Katarina loved exploring the outdoors, and she was always reading books. Now, there was one thing that was pretty significant in the family, and that was religion. They were a very religious family. They went to church every single Sunday, and the girls went to Sunday school, and they were strictly raised to follow the 10 Commandments. Now, as the girls grew up and reached their teenage years, their interest in religion became extreme, because Clara and Katarina, and I don't know about Gabrielle, like I don't know if she was the same as well, but Clara and Katarina, they started to have dreams and visions that they were, quote, the chosen ones. Clara in particular thought that she was destined to fulfill a special mission for God. She would go on and on about this, and Clara believed that she had some sort of like divine powers, and she was meant to achieve something bigger than herself. Like, she was meant to do something. In fact, on one occasion, she was found suffocating her sister Katarina with a pillow. And she did this because she believed that she had the power to bring her sister back to life. But thankfully, adults intervened before anything actually happened. But you can see how extreme this is. And Katarina was the same. She was like it as well. And the girls were like it when they were at school. They would go on about how they had these divine powers, that they were the chosen ones. And teachers and social workers started to become very concerned about the girls because they were having like these delusions. And it started to be suspected that both Clara and Katarina Katarina possibly had schizophrenia. So social workers contacted their parents and talked to them that maybe the children, they need to be looked at, maybe they need some treatment. But Clara and Katarina's mom flat out refused to get her girls looked at, get them treatment. She didn't want to hear about it. Instead, she just pulled her two girls out of that school and moved them to a different school. So their condition, whatever it was, maybe it was schizophrenia, we don't know, but whatever their condition was, it went untreated. And because it was left untreated, it continued to get worse and worse. Okay, so now we skip forward to the mid-90s and Clara is currently 18 years old. And for some reason, I don't know, at this point, Clara had become completely estranged from her family. She didn't talk to any of them. She didn't even talk to her sister, Katarina. And it was at this point when Clara was 18 years old that she entered into a relationship with a man called Radek. And this was a pretty whirlwind relationship. The pair quickly married, and then literally within the space of 2 years, they had 2 children. The first was a boy named Jakob, who Clara had when she was 20 years old, and then a second boy called Andre 2 years later. And in the beginning of this relationship, it's going pretty well. They're a little happy family. They have these 2 children. They settled into an apartment, and Clara actually went on to university to study for a degree in economics. And then she got a job as a secretary, and it was all going great. However, like I said, it is suspected that Clara had undiagnosed schizophrenia. And a few years later, when Clara was 26, things start to fall apart. Clara started being delusional again. She started getting visions again that she was on a mission from God, that she was meant to achieve something bigger than herself. And Clara started to believe that her marriage and her children were distracting her from her mission from God. Clara started telling her husband that he was stopping her from fulfilling her destiny. And there would be many fights, many arguments in that household. And in the end, her husband just couldn't take it anymore and he filed for divorce. Now, when I was at this point in the research, I was expecting Clara to give up her children as well and the children go with the father, because she's already said that her children are a distraction from her mission from God. But that doesn't happen. She actually takes her 2 children, leaves her husband, and then all of a sudden, out of the blue, reconnects with her sister Katarina. And this is pretty much when things go downhill very quickly. And they both move into an apartment together with Clara's young children. And at first, everything is great. They are a really close-knit family. Clara is a great mom at this point, and Katarina is a great aunt, and the 2 boys are really happy. Jakob loves basketball and dinosaurs. He also plays the flute, and Andre is very sporty. He loves hockey and he loves being outdoors, exploring. Jakob and Andre are being raised into just lovely children. They are being cared for properly, they are being loved, and they are given attention. So Katarina is a manager at a local day center, and she is in charge of looking after a lot of young children. And it wasn't too long after the 2 sisters moved in together that Katarina also got Clara a job at this day center. So they are working together, they live together, they are raising the 2 boys together, and everything is great. However, unfortunately, things don't stay like this. And Clara, because it is suspected that she has untreated schizophrenia, she couldn't escape the delusions. She couldn't escape the voices in her head. And her condition just slowly deteriorated over the years. And something else happened at pretty much the same time, because Katarina introduced Clara to another very significant person in today's case. And that was a 13-year-old girl called Anishka. And this is where things start to get very, very confusing and all over the place and just outright bizarre. And I'm going to try and tell you what happens as simply as possible, but it's very confusing, so I'm sorry. So basically what happened, because the 2 sisters worked at this day center, Katarina approached Clara and said, "Oh, hey, we've had this new child arrive. She is 13 years old. She is from Norway and she's had a pretty rough childhood and she's in need for some like real special care. She needs to be looked after. Katarina then goes on to say that the 13-year-old girl, her name is Anishka, who went by the nickname Anna. So I am going to call her Anna from now on. And she's had a very troubled life. Apparently Anna's both parents died when she was young. She then went to multiple orphanages where she received terrible abuse. And then Anna, with a bunch of other children, was sold into a paedophile ring where she was subjected to absolutely horrific sexual abuse and torture. Anna also had to participate in abusing and torturing other children as well when she was sold into this paedophile ring. Eventually, Anna managed to escape this paedophile ring. She got herself to safety and then she managed to find a doctor that specialized in helping children with traumatic pasts. And this doctor, who we don't know the identity of because it's all a mystery, so this doctor helped Anna on her road to recovery, but then it was found that Anna was also suffering from leukemia and it was unlikely that she would live past the age of 16. And it's like, oh my God, the amount of things that Anna has been through, her parents dying, the abuse at the orphanages, the paedophile ring, and now she has leukemia and she's unlikely to live past the age of 16 and she's currently 13. And Anna was desperately seeking for somebody to adopt her. So when she went to the daycare center that Katarina was the manager of, Katarina felt sorry for her. And that is when Katarina introduces Anna to her sister Clara and says, Clara, this girl needs care. Clara, will you adopt Anna? And Clara, after hearing the absolutely horrific story of Anna's childhood, couldn't help herself. She said, yes, of course I will adopt her. Of course I will look after her. And this is when the process to formally adopt Anna began. So now we get to September of 2005 and Anna starts living with the family. So now the family are living as Clara, Katarina, Jakob, Andre, and now Anna. So they are a family of 5 now. So remember that Anna is suffering from cancer, and it was around this time that her chemotherapy treatment started. Now, even though it was Clara that was legally adopting Anna, for some reason, Clara was never allowed to take Anna to the hospital for her treatment. The only person that was allowed to take Anna to the hospital for treatment was Katarina, which is strange. It's like, why isn't Clara allowed to the hospital? But it wasn't just the strange chemotherapy sessions that were going on. Do you remember that mysterious doctor? Well, he was still the doctor that was treating Anna for her cancer. And remember, we do not know the identity of this mysterious doctor. Well, this doctor only got in touch with Clara through text message, which is strange. It's like, why is the doctor that is treating Anna for cancer only getting in contact with her legal guardian through text message? Clara and Anna's doctor never met face to face. But that was not the only suspicious thing when it came to this doctor. Oh no. Because this doctor started sending through text message instructions to Clara on how to treat Anna, on how to care for Anna. And this is where it gets really creepy, like really, really creepy, like disgusting. So this doctor said in text message, in order for Anna to recover from her traumatic past, she would need to be shown a lot of love and affection and attention. But Anna needed praise, constant praise. Every day, Clara was instructed to tell Anna just how amazing she was. Clara was also required to buy Anna gifts on pretty much a daily basis. The doctor also told Clara that in order to treat Anna's medical condition, Clara would be required to give Anna full body massages every single night, and these massages included her intimate area. And it's just like, what? This doctor is telling Clara to massage a 13-year-old child. I'm sorry, what medical condition is this supposed to treat? I do not know, but unbelievably, Clara agreed to do this. I'm like, what? And these massages of her entire body would sometimes last 8 hours. So things are obviously incredibly strange, but they get worse. They get so much worse. Clara's friends started to notice that Anna displayed some very bizarre behavior. They noticed that Anna would just stare at the floor. She wouldn't really like making eye contact with anyone. And for some reason, Anna also refused to walk. Even though she could, there was no medical condition that Anna had that prevented her from walking, but she just demanded that Clara carry her pretty much everywhere. Anna was also incredibly demanding. She would throw explosive temper tantrums if she didn't get what she wanted. And she would also threaten to take her own life if she didn't get what she wanted. One time she threatened to jump out of the window of their apartment whilst holding a knife. There was another time where Anna threatened and nearly jumped in front of a moving train. On top of all of that, Anna seemed to take an extreme disliking to Clara's other two children, Jakob and Andre. Even though the two boys, they are only 8 and 6 at this point, they have never done anything to Anna. Anna just didn't like them because they also got attention from Clara, and Anna wanted the full attention of Clara. But Anna would say that the two boys were bullying her, which they weren't. And Clara, for some reason, always took the side of Anna. She always believed Anna. And at this point, Clara started to turn against her own children, which just doesn't make sense. It's like, why are you taking the side of this mysterious 13-year-old girl who has literally just walked into your lives? And Clara started to neglect her own children and focus all of her attention on Anna. Clara also started to stop looking after herself as well. She stopped eating and taking care of herself. She stopped showering. She lost a lot of weight. She was just looking very disheveled all the time. She was only getting approximately 3 hours of sleep every single night. She was also seeing less of her friends and family. Clara was a shadow of her former self, and it was all because of Anna. And then there was one more significant thing about Anna. For those of you that have watched Orphan, you may know what is going on. So even though Anna, for the most part, looked like a child, there were some things about her that made her seem a lot older than she was. Because even though Anna threw temper tantrums like a child, like a teenager, she could almost flick a switch and be very cold and very calculated and very manipulative. And she would manipulate people and things in a very clever, very mature way. Whenever Anna was seen doodling, she would be drawing things that were possibly a bit too mature for her age. And a lot of people commented that her eyes seemed older than 13. There was just something about the gaze in her eyes that told you she was older than 13, that she had seen more of the world of life than just 13 years. But it turns out that those suspicions were pretty legitimate, and this is where a big twist in the case comes. Because unbelievably, Anna was not a 13-year-old girl. Oh no, no, no. She was a 33-year-old woman. I know. What the hell? Pick your jaw up off the floor. Anna is 33 years old, and Anna is not even her real name, or Anishka is not even her real name. Oh no. Her real name is Barbara Skrylova, and right now she is pretending to be 13-year-old Anishka to be adopted by Clara. And Clara had absolutely no idea that Anna was not 13 years old and Anna was actually Barbara. It's like, how the hell is she getting away with posing as a 13-year-old girl when she's a 33-year-old woman? What the hell is going on? This case is so baffling. And this is where the whole inspiration for the movie Orphan comes in. In the movie, a child gets adopted by a family, but she's actually an adult and she causes absolute chaos and mayhem for that family. And that is essentially what is happening here. But if you think that we have covered the most crazy and baffling part of this case so far, you would be wrong. Because first of all, to help us understand this whole mess and understand what the hell is going on, we first need to go back and look at Anna, who is actually Barbara Skrylova. So Barbara Skrylova was born on the 20th of July 1974, making her a Cancer. She grew up in the Czech Republic, where she lived with her parents and her 2 siblings. Now, as a child, it is said that Barbara was severely neglected. Her mom had a bad drinking problem, and her dad was pretty much absent for her whole childhood. So Barbara spent the majority of her childhood alone. And throughout Barbara's teenage years, it was suspected that she was living with a number of mental health conditions, including dissociative personality disorder and schizophrenia. Barbara was also known to bend the truth a lot, but it was also discovered that Barbara was living with a very rare medical condition, and I always struggle to pronounce this word. And this condition is called hypopituitarism. I don't know if that is exactly how you pronounce it, but that has to be one of the hardest words I think I've ever had to pronounce in my life. Hypopituitarism. So I'm not a medical professional, so please correct me if I'm wrong. So this condition basically means that Barbara's pituitary gland does not produce enough growth hormones, and this stunted her growth, which meant that Barbara would remain looking childlike even into her adult years, which is obviously very significant in today's case. So as Barbara went into her teenage years, as she went into an adult, she still looked like a child. She always looked so much younger than her peers. And because she looked like a child, adults around her always treated her like a child. And Barbara hated this, which I can completely understand. And Barbara decided that she was going to start using her condition to get revenge on the adults around her. So because the adults around her saw her as a child, Barbara learned how to act like a child and use this to her advantage. But because she was an adult, she was a lot more skilled at manipulating adults than a child would be. So she would literally manipulate adults into thinking that she was a child that needed care, that needed help. And they would let Barbara into their homes and give her food, give her money, give her attention. And this is where it just gets really crazy with Barbara, because Barbara, even though she was manipulating pretty much any adult that she could come across, she felt like she still wasn't getting enough attention. So in her later teenage years, Barbara actually tricked a family into thinking that she was a young orphan that needed adopting. And this family took Barbara into their home, they cared for her, they started the adoption process, which is the exact same thing that she is currently doing to Clara. However, in this adoption, the one before Clara, it was discovered that Barbara was not a child and the adoption didn't go through. But when her deception was discovered, she was committed to a psychiatric facility to undergo treatment to kind of like help her to make sure like she didn't do this again. But guess what? Barbara escaped the facility, and what did she go on and do? She tried to do the exact same thing again. She went to a family, she put on this, oh, I'm a poor orphan story. And this family again took Barbara in because they thought that she was a child in need, and they started the adoption process. It is crazy that Barbara has now done this twice, and technically 3 times if you want to include Clara right now. Again though, it was discovered that Barbara was not a child, and this time Barbara's own parents and the authorities committed her to another psychiatric facility for treatment, and Barbara would now spend an extended period of time in this facility until her late 20s, when she was finally released because they thought that she had been treated. And it is after she is released, it is approximately 2003, 2004 at this point. Barbara is nearly 30 years old. Barbara went on to university to study for a degree in music and performing arts. And this is when she became acquainted with Katarina, Clara's sister. Yeah, we haven't really mentioned Katarina that much in this video so far, but she plays a pretty significant role, because if it wasn't for Katarina, Clara would never have met Barbara. So when Barbara and Katarina meet, they are very similar in age and they hit it off immediately. And if you remember, Katarina is a manager at a daycare center, and Barbara also starts to work at this daycare center. Now, I want to stress that Barbara worked at the daycare center before Clara. So Clara did not meet Barbara until later on, when Barbara was Anna. I'm sorry, this is so confusing confusing, isn't it? So Barbara starts working at the daycare center, and she's working there for a few months, and everything seems normal. Everything is going great. However, Barbara, she seems to get this itch that she wants to act like a child, because children naturally get more attention from adults. And if there is one thing that you need to know about Barbara, is that she loves attention. That is what she thrives on. I think that is the whole motivation behind today's case when it comes to Barbara. She just wants attention. So Barbara wants to be a child again. However, the last 2 times that she has pretended to be a child, it has been discovered. So she wants to make sure that this time it doesn't get discovered. She wants to be more clever about it. She doesn't want to go back to a psychiatric facility, so she decides to divulge her plans to Katarina. So Barbara approaches Katarina and says, "Hey, we're friends, can you help me? I kind of want to change my identity and become a child. Can you help me with that?" Now, anyone in their right mind would be like, what? You want to become a child? No, I'm not going to help you with that. But Katarina said, yeah, okay, I'll help you. So Barbara suddenly disappeared from work. Her other colleagues at the daycare center had no idea where she had gone. And then in secret, Barbara and Katarina got to work making Barbara look more childlike. And she went to extreme lengths to look like a child. Barbara lost so much weight. She literally starved herself and lost over half of her body weight to look more childlike. She also started to dress more childlike as well. She would wear bright colors and cartoons on her t-shirt. Not that you have to be a child to dress like that, but you know what I mean. She was just dressing more like a child. She also underwent a breast reduction surgery and liposuction. She went to extreme lengths to make herself look childlike. And after a few months and after recovering from the surgeries, Barbara was ready to be reintroduced to the world as a 13-year-old girl called Anishka. Now, the original plan was for Barbara, or should I say Anishka, or Anna, as her nickname is. The original plan was for Anna to just attend the daycare center as another child and just be another child at the daycare center, which is just really weird. However, Katarina and Barbara decided against this. They actually wanted to go one step further, and it was probably Barbara's idea for this to happen, but Barbara wanted to be adopted, and Katarina said, well, I've got the perfect person that can adopt you, my sister. And it was pretty much at this time when Clara started working at the daycare center, and this is when Katarina and Barbara come up with the fake backstory for Anishka to sell to Clara to make Clara feel sorry for Anishka and adopt her. So that whole backstory that Anna's parents died, that she went to orphanages, that she was abused physically and mentally, that she was sold into a paedophile ring, and she had cancer, that is all fake. That was her fake backstory to make Clara feel sorry for her. And that is also why, if you remember, because this case is so confusing, I wouldn't be surprised if you've forgotten, and that is why when Anna, who is obviously Barbara, I will probably be using both names interchangeably, and I'm really sorry if it gets confusing, but I have kind of got to use both names. That is why Clara was never allowed to take Anna for cancer treatment, because she never actually had cancer. But Anna, after these fake cancer treatments, would come home wrapped in a blanket as if she had undergone chemotherapy, and she would come back with tubes sticking out of her. And then if you remember this whole mystery doctor situation, we actually still don't know who this doctor is. This doctor could have been Barbara herself, or even Katarina, or even someone else. I'm thinking it was probably Barbara. Like, I think the fake doctor is Barbara, which then makes you think, why the hell was Barbara messaging Clara for Clara to give her body massages? Why Would she want that? Oh God, I don't even want to think about it. There is just so many things in this case where I cannot wrap my head around what is going on and what were the motivations behind all of this. I mean, like I said, I do think for Barbara, it was for attention because that is what she thrived on. I mean, was it because Barbara was neglected as a child, so she has this need inside of her to find a parental figure, which is why she has tried to get adopted so many times? But what is Katarina getting out of this? Like, I have not got a clue. And Clara, unbelievably, was apparently completely oblivious to all of this. And why I say apparently like that is because there is part of me that thinks, how did she buy all of this? It's like, I understand that Barbara has that condition where she does look like a child, that she didn't have enough growth hormones. I do understand that, but I've seen pictures of Barbara and she does not look like a 13-year-old to me. You can just tell when someone is a child and when someone is an adult. And I just feel like when you look at Barbara, her features, her eyes, she just looks like an adult. There are a few photos where I can see possibly where you would think that she was a teenager, but for the most part, I just think she looks like an adult. So that is why there is part of me that just struggles to believe that Clara had no idea about any of this. But anyway, apparently Clara has no idea about Barbara's true identity, or Anna's true identity. Oh my God, it is so confusing. And I'm really sorry if this case is so confusing. It was a nightmare to research. And it's typical, isn't it, that I chose probably one of the most complicated cases to research and deliver when I'm ill. So now we get to the summer of 2006, and Anna has been living with Clara and Katarina and Jakob and Andre for approximately 1 year. So this whole ruse that Anna is a 13-year-old child has been going on for a year, and Clara is currently going through the legal process of adopting Anna, which is not exactly very straightforward because Anna is obviously not a real person. So in order to get around the legal system, Katarina and Barbara had to get creative. First of all, they had to fake identification documents because Anna didn't have a birth certificate or passport or nothing like that because obviously she's not a real person. But then they also needed to fake medical records to say that Anna had cancer, which somehow they actually managed to do all of that. I'm not completely sure how they did that, but they did manage to fake these documents. And then finally, Anna had to undergo a medical examination to verify her age. Now, I'm not sure if this is necessary for adoption, I don't know, but she had to go through an examination. And you're probably thinking, this is when she gets caught because obviously she's 33 years old, she's not 13. How is she actually going to get around this examination? Well, Katarina and Barbara had a plan for this. Katarina had a friend who also had a 13-year-old daughter, and Katarina managed to manipulate her friend into letting her borrow her daughter. Katarina and Barbara used this random, poor, innocent 13-year-old girl to undergo the medical examination to confirm Anna's age as 13. Unbelievable. So this young girl, this innocent girl, had to undergo this medical examination, and it was confirmed that Anna was 13 years old. Barbara and Katarina had managed to fool the legal and medical system. And because it was verified that Anna was 13, that she was a real person, that she was an orphan, Clara was legally allowed to adopt her. So this is what happened. Barbara was given a birth certificate with a made-up birthday that Barbara had created, which was the 2nd of December 1993. And Barbara was also given the legal name of Anishka Mauerova. So Barbara is now officially adopted. And we now need to return to what is happening to Jakob and Andre. Because if you remember, Barbara had turned against Jakob and Andre, and she had started to manipulate Clara into turning against her own children. Now, first of all, because Clara was neglecting her sons, Jakob and Andre, her two sons had started to act out. They had started to rebel against the family apparently they had started to misbehave a little bit, which is completely understandable because they are now being neglected. But unfortunately, because the two boys had started to act out, this reinforced the story that Anna was saying that Jakob and Andre were bullies, that they were bullying her, that they were really mean. And because Clara could see that her two boys were acting out, Clara thought, well, Anna must be telling the truth. And because Jakob and Andre were acting out, Clara started to punish them. And this only led to Jakob and Andre acting out more and more. And one day, Anna approached Clara and said that she had an idea of how Clara could discipline her two boys better and keep them in order better. And you just have to remember here that Anna is supposed to be a 13-year-old girl. Why would Clara be taking parental advice from a 13-year-old girl? But Clara is so brainwashed by Anna that she listens to her. And this is when the mystery doctor comes back up. Well, Anna said to Clara that her doctor, the one that was treating her for cancer, was also an expert in disciplining children and making them behave. So this mystery doctor starts messaging Clara again about how she can discipline her children better. The doctor said in the text messages that in order to make Anna feel more welcome in their home, Clara needed to stop her two boys from bullying Anna. And in order to stop her two boys from bullying Anna, Clara must issue out severe punishments. And I need to warn you now, this is where this case gets very, very hard to listen to. So first of all, the doctor advised Clara that her two boys needed to be cut off from all external influences, which meant they needed to be pulled out of school, which is exactly what Clara did. She pulled her two boys out of school and now they were being homeschooled. They were also not allowed any contact with any other family members. So the two boys were no longer allowed to see their dad, who currently they were seeing every other weekend. And they were also not allowed to see their grandparents, who they were incredibly close to. Next, the doctor advised that Clara must issue out physical punishments. So Clara would hit her two boys with objects such as a wooden spoon or a belt buckle. But it wasn't just physical punishments, it was also psychological punishments as well. For example, the two boys were made to kneel in the same spot for hours and they were not allowed to move. They were also locked in a cupboard with no light, no food, no bathroom. They were also forced to sleep on the concrete floor. They had no access to a bed. And it's just absolutely horrific. You don't want to think about this. You don't want to think about children being treated like this. And I just don't understand Clara. Prior to this, prior to being introduced to this 13-year-old girl, Anna, she was a really great mom. And it's just unbelievable that Clara has completely changed as a person. And she is doing this on the advice of a mystery doctor that will only communicate to her through text messages, a 13-year-old girl that she has just adopted, and then don't forget her evil sister. But remember in the intro, I said that there was kind of a cult involved in today's case? Well, now we get to that. It is not entirely clear, but it is suspected that a cult is behind all of this, why these two boys are being treated the way they are. So yes, we now get on to the cult of this story. And the leader of this cult is none other than Anna's, aka Barbara's, own biological father. Yep, Barbara's dad is the leader of a cult. I bet you didn't expect that, did you? No, because I didn't. Again, I feel like I need to say, what the actual hell is going on? So this cult is run by Barbara's dad, and her dad is called Joseph, and this cult went by the name of the Grail Movement. Now, the Grail Movement is an international religious movement that was first created in Germany in the 1930s. And over the years, this movement has splintered off into many different factions. And Barbara's dad is a leader of just one faction. It's very confusing. I tried to do some research on the Grail movement, but I couldn't really wrap my head around it. But just know that the Grail movement is many different factions. It's many different movements. They don't all believe in the same thing. And I think that some factions are normal people. They're just involved in like a movement. I don't think they're all very culty, but some of the splintered off factions of the Grail movement are not good people. For example, there was one leader of a faction of the Grail movement in 2008 that was arrested for keeping the female followers that he had as slaves. He forced the women that followed him into slave labor. He treated them poorly. He gave them physical and psychological punishments. And the conditions that these women were kept in were so bad that one of the women actually died. And this finally led to that faction cult leader into being arrested. And thankfully, the women were finally freed. Yeah, a lot of the people in the Grail movement don't seem like the best people. And in the early 2000s, Barbara's dad, Josef, became a leader of one of these factions from the Grail movement. And his particular faction was in the Czech Republic. And I don't know exactly how many members he had, but there were quite a few. And the basic beliefs of this cult were that you could get into heaven by doing good deeds. But also, more importantly, doing these good deeds absolved them from their sins, which meant that the followers of this cult were free to go on and commit crime, abuse others, do whatever they wanted, as long as they believed that it was for the greater good of humanity. And in particular, this cult had very strong beliefs on child discipline. They believed that for children to grow up into good, upstanding, good citizens, they needed to be raised with a very firm hand. They believed in doing absolutely terrible things to children because it would make them into good people. And given that her dad was the leader of this cult, I'm sure it comes to no surprise to any of you that Barbara was also a member of this cult. Katarina was also a member of this cult. Yeah, not too long after Katarina met Barbara for the first time, Katarina also joined the cult. And it was now in 2006, Barbara, or should I say Anna, had wormed her way into Clara's life. Barbara, Anna, now decided that she wanted Clara to also join the cult. Barbara and Katarina wanted Clara to join the cult so they could brainwash her even more. And the whole cult were in on the ruse that Barbara was a 13-year-old girl called Anna. And Clara joins the cult, and Clara is given lessons on how she should discipline her two children. And this is when the treatment of Jakob and Andre just continues to get worse and worse. So it is now August 2006, and Clara receives a message from the mystery doctor, and this message instructed Clara that in order to properly fix her children, she must take them to a re-education camp. And this re-education camp was located in a cottage that was pretty much in the middle of nowhere. And guess who ran this re-education camp? Well, of course, it was the cult. Waiting at this cottage in the middle of nowhere were 3 cult members, and their names were 29-year-old Jan Turek, 26-year-old Hanna Basova, and 23-year-old Jan Skrala, who was Barbara's own brother, her younger brother. Now, Barbara's dad, who is the leader of the cult, he was not present at the cottage, but I'm sure he knew what was going on. So these 3 evil cult members, along with Barbara and Katarina and Clara, they were all going to re-educate the 2 boys, Jakob and Andre. And I've got to warn you again, this is where it gets really, really, really bad. I actually cannot believe I am about to say the things that I am going to say. I'm actually going to struggle to keep it together, to be honest. So first of all, when Clara arrived at the cottage with her 2 boys, she was told that she shouldn't look at herself as a mother anymore. She should actually look at herself as a tutor. And then Jakob and Andre were taken away by the other cult members, and they were both placed in dog cages. And these cages were so tiny, neither one of the boys could actually stand up, and they were kept in these cages the whole time, apart from when they were taken out of the cages to be reprogrammed. They would sleep in the cages, they would eat and drink in the cages, they would also have to go to the toilet in these cages. And the two brothers, even though these cages were right next to one another, they were forbidden from talking to one another. So even though the cages were right next to each other, they were completely alone, they were completely isolated. When the boys were let out of the cages, they were sometimes tied up like animals. They would have collars around their necks. They were sometimes tied to various things around the house, so they literally couldn't escape, they couldn't walk away. Both of the boys were also barely fed, so they were incredibly weak, so they couldn't fight back. But you've also got to realize that the boys, when they're at this cottage, they are so young. They are only 7 and 9 years old. And if they ever tried to escape, ever tried to speak to one another, if they ever stepped out of line, they would be severely punished. And it would usually be physical punishments, beatings. And then very sadly, next came the reprogramming sessions. The two boys were forced to read vulgar texts and memorize them and say them out loud, but then they were also punished for saying these vulgar things. Secondly, in the reprogramming sessions came the severe punishments. Over the next few days and then weeks, the boys were only taken out of their cages to be subjected to some of the most cruel treatment imaginable. They would have bags placed over their head and they would be beaten with belt buckles and bamboo poles. Their skin was scratched with sharp forks. They had cigarettes pushed into their skin. Their heads were also held repeatedly in buckets of water, and they also had boiling hot water poured over their bodies. And I literally cannot believe that I'm saying these things out loud. You just don't want to think about it. Like, you don't. And it's heartbreaking that this actually happened. And these cruel and sadistic punishments were carried out by the 3 cult members that were at the cottage. But the punishments were also carried out by Anna, aka Barbara, Katarina, and then Clara. Clara was joining in, which blows my mind. I'm just like, what are you doing? These are your sons. What are you doing? For some reason, Clara had been convinced and brainwashed into torturing her own children. I don't care what happens. It's like you should not be able to be brainwashed into abusing your own children. And very sadly, these punishments continued, and the days turned into weeks and the weeks turned into months. But it wasn't just physical abuse that the boys went through. No, it was psychological as well. They would have industrial music blasted at a really high volume all day, every day. And that just reminds me of Suzanne Kappa. The boys would also be told that there were so many cult members hiding in the house wanting to harm them, which was not true. I mean, there obviously were people in the house that wanted to harm them, but the boys were told that there were a lot of cult members in this house. And again, this was psychological torture because the 3 cult members, along with Barbara, Katarina, and Clara, they would all go around the house chanting and shouting to make it seem like there was a load of cult members there. At one point as well, Barbara almost drowned Andre because she was repeatedly holding his head in a bucket of water, and she clearly held it under the water for too long. Again, this next thing is one of the most horrendous things I've ever heard, because they wanted to turn the boys against each other. So the boys were instructed to harm each other. The boys were instructed to fight. They were given knives. On another occasion, and this is just truly sick, Jakob was forced to dig his own grave and lie in it. He was forced to pretend to be dead. And then Andre, his younger brother, was brought out and shown Jakob, and Andre was told that Jakob was dead. Andre was forced to throw dirt over his dead brother. It's just so sick. And then Andre was told that Jakob could be brought back to life, but only if Andre behaved himself. And then miraculously, Jakob came back to life. And then this next thing, oh my god, this next thing in the case is probably the most notorious part of today's case, and it truly is possibly the most disturbing thing that I have come across in any of these cases. Clara was instructed by the cult members that to truly reprogram her children, to truly make them into good, decent human beings and make them behave themselves, she would have to cut a piece of flesh from one of the boys, and then this piece of flesh would be handed around each cult member, and each cult member would eat a little bit of that flesh. And I really wish I could tell you that it didn't happen, but it did. Clara agreed to do this. Clara agreed to cut a piece of flesh from one of her children. At first, she was apparently hesitant about this, and she needed some help and assistance from the other cult members, but in the end, she did it. She chose which one of her sons she was going to cut the flesh from, and she chose her younger son, Andre, and she cut a circular piece of flesh from Andre's buttocks, and then apparently this piece of flesh was handed to each cult member for them to consume a little bit of that flesh. And there are even rumors in some sources that the two boys were also forced to eat some of this flesh, which, if that is true, that is the most disturbing thing I've ever heard in my life. Andre was forced to eat some of his own flesh. And when you think about Andre and the fact that his flesh was cut from him, he was alive, obviously, when that happened, and he would have had no pain medication or anything like that. It's just too much. It's like, I can't believe I've just said all of that. I'm really sorry. I always get torn about cases like this because they're too horrific to even talk about, but I feel like they need to be talked about because it's like, this happened to people. So Jakob and Andre have been trapped in this nightmare for approximately 3 months. Now, after the 3 months, the other cult members told Clara that she was no longer needed. She could leave the cottage and take Anna, Barbara, with her. So Clara and Anna, Barbara, they leave the cottage and they actually go house hunting because they need a bigger house. They need a house that's more private. And they do eventually find a new house in a town called Karim. And I really hope that that is how you pronounce that town, because I tried to find out how to pronounce it, but everywhere pronounced it differently. And this new house was paid for by the cult, of course. And in this new house, Anna got her own room that was really nicely decorated because, of course, Anna is the chosen one and she gets treated the best. Meanwhile, Clara's own children are locked up in cages in that cottage. And then around a month later, so Andre and Jakob have been in the cottage for about 4 months at this point. It is decided that Andre, who is the younger of the two, would be allowed to return home to Clara. So only Andre is allowed to leave, not Jakob. Jakob is to stay at the cottage, and I don't know why this decision was made. Maybe they thought that Jakob needed more reprogramming. I just don't know. And you might be thinking, well, at least one of them has gotten out of the cottage. Hopefully the treatment stops. But you would be wrong, because the abuse and torture would only continue for Andre as soon as he returned home. So like I said, Anna has her own bedroom. It's really nicely decorated. It's full of toys. It's full of clothes. It's full of everything. But Andre, as soon as he returns home, he is sent to the cupboard under the stairs, and that is where he was going to stay. He had no access to light because there was no window or light in this cupboard. He was in darkness and locked up for 24 hours every single day. He was not given a bed or any blankets or pillows, nothing like that. He had to sleep on the hard floor. The only source of hygiene that he had was a bucket of cold water thrown over him. He also had no access to a toilet, so he had to urinate and defecate in the cupboard under the stairs, which was never cleaned out. If he ever vomited from his surroundings, maybe, he was forced to eat his own vomit. And if Clara ever left the house to prevent Andre from escaping, even though, let's be realistic, how is he going to escape a locked cupboard under the stairs? His wrists and his ankles were bound. And he was left tied up. It was like strung together, his wrists and his ankles, and he literally could not move. Most of the time as well, he was also left naked. And this treatment of Andre lasted for 5 months. And you're probably thinking, when does this nightmare end? Like, when does it end? And thankfully, it does soon end. A stroke of good fortune would actually occur in this case. So on the 7th of May 2007, a man named Edward was in his home in Karim trying to set up a baby monitor for the very first time. And he was struggling to set up this baby monitor. He couldn't figure out how to make it work. He was having technology issues, as we all do. And then all of a sudden, a strange video appeared on the monitor screen. And the video was of a child, but it wasn't his child. Instead, it showed a naked young boy tied up, just lying on a concrete floor. And when Edward first saw this on his monitor, he was like, what the hell is this? He thought that there was something wrong with his monitor. Like, he didn't think what he was seeing on his monitor was real, because you probably wouldn't, would you? And he was going to complain to the manufacturer because clearly his monitor was broke, and he just went on with his day. But throughout the day, he couldn't stop thinking about that child lying on the concrete floor. What was that all about? Was it real? So he told his wife what had happened earlier on, and they both turned on the monitor together. And again, the same child appeared on their monitor screen, and they saw the child roaming around this small concrete room, and the child appeared to be eating something from the floor. Now, at this point, Edward and his wife became incredibly concerned, because I think it was at this moment that it clicked that what they were seeing was actually real. They figured out that they were actually picking up a live feed from somewhere else somehow, and immediately they called the police, and the police arrived very quickly to the home. Now, when the police arrived, they observed the footage, and given the range of the device, the police figured out that the signal, the footage, must be coming from a house that was very close by. And in the footage, they could hear music, because obviously we know that the cult like to use music as a form of punishment. So then the police went outside of Edward's home, and they started listening out for this music, and they hear this music coming from an immediate neighbor that was opposite Edward. So the police knock on that door, and a woman answers in her 30s, and the police say to this woman in her 30s that they are looking for a child. But the woman says to the police officers, I don't know what you're talking about. No children here. Don't know what you're talking about. However, Edward inside his own home is still watching the monitor, and he said that he could hear the police officer's voice on his monitor. So the police realized that they were at the right house. They forced their way into the home, and of course the woman that opened the door to the police officers was none other than Clara Mauerova. The police search for the house for the child, and then they come across the cupboard under the stairs, which is locked with a padlock, which is so suspicious. The police immediately try and break open the door when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, another young child comes out. A young girl by the name of Anna. Anna starts screaming, Mama, Mama, what's happening? And Anna, aka Barbara, runs up to the police officers, grabs onto their legs, and starts shouting, no, 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 literally trying to stop the officers from getting into the cupboard under the stairs. The officers at this point don't realize that Anna is actually an adult and is trying to prevent them from getting into the cupboard. They think that she is another child that they need to rescue. So they do hold her back, and they eventually break the padlock on the cupboard under the stairs. And this is when they find Andre Mauerova. He was naked, he was tied up, he was malnourished, he was lying in his own vomit and urine and excrement, and he was in a terrible state. He has been mistreated for so long now, almost a year, but he has finally been rescued. Andre is immediately taken to safety, and Clara is arrested on the spot. Katarina was also at the house at the time the police arrived, so Katarina was also arrested. But then when it came to Barbara Anna. The police believed that Barbara was 13-year-old Anna. So obviously they are not going to arrest a 13-year-old girl that they suspect is also a victim. So Barbara, aka Anna, was also taken to the children's shelter with Andre. It's just like, oh my god, you cannot make this stuff up. So as soon as Andre was rescued, they soon discovered that he had an older brother called Jakob, and it was like, where the hell is Jakob? So Jakob was still at the cottage with the other cult members. But what was really weird is that the cult members had allowed Jakob to start attending public school, and I can't tell you why they decided to allow Jakob to school, because obviously that was one of the things in the cult, that they couldn't allow the children to have outside influences. So I don't know, but Jakob was attending public school, and this actually made it very easy to track him down. So the authorities now had both Andre and Jakob in their care. And of course, both of them were in an absolute terrible state because they had been mistreated for so long. They were both covered in scars and cuts and bruises. They were so pale, they were malnourished. They had barely been fed the whole time. They barely slept. They had serious psychological effects because of what happened to them. It was discovered that they had mood and developmental disorders because of their treatment, because of the lack of food and the lack of sleep, and also the lack of daylight. Because remember as well, they were basically kept in the dark for 24 hours a day. And when they were rescued, the boys were aged 8 and 10. And what's really sad is that they were unable to function like other children their age. They almost had to be retaught things. And I just found this so sad when I read this. They had to be taught how to sleep in a bed, which seems so alien to me. And I'm sure it seems so alien to hopefully all of you. How do you have to teach someone to sleep in a bed? They also had to be taught how to use a knife and a fork. They had to be taught how to talk properly. They didn't know how to communicate because for so long they were never allowed to communicate. And after a lot of rehabilitation, the boys both started to tell the authorities what had happened to them. And this is when the authorities learned the extent of the abuse and the torture that the boys were put through. Both Jakob and Andre were incredibly brave to tell the authorities what they had gone through, because they would have had to relive everything. As well, the cult had threatened both of the boys that if they ever told anyone what happened to them, the cult would track them down and kill them. And it wasn't long until both of the boys started attending school again. They started living a normal life again. The two boys were also reunited with their father and their grandparents, which is just really amazing to hear. However, we have one more person to deal with, because remember that Anna, aka Barbara, was also rescued, and her story is far from over. So Anna was initially under the protection of the children's shelter, just like Andre and Jakob were, and authorities thought that they were going to have to rehabilitate Anna just like the two boys, because obviously she was also a victim. But instead, after only a few days at the shelter, Anna, aka Barbara, escaped. She escaped through an open window, and when the police found out that she had gone, they initially thought that she had been kidnapped by the people that were holding her. A huge search went underway to try and find Anna, because they thought that she was a victim, they thought that she was a child and they needed to save her. I'm talking hundreds of officers, helicopters, police dogs, the whole works, but Anna was nowhere to be seen. And then to make things so much more confusing, a letter was sent to the police from Anna saying that her mom, Clara, was completely innocent and that the two boys, Andre and Jakob, were making everything up, which the police did not believe because they could see with their own eyes what the two boys had gone through. But something suspicious about this letter was that the police looked at this letter and they thought there is no way a 13-year-old wrote this letter. The grammar, the language used, everything was just way too mature for a 13-year-old. So the police started to become very suspicious. They knew that they needed to find Anna straight away, and they had her picture plastered pretty much everywhere. And finally, a few days later, someone saw the photo, recognized who it was, phoned up the police and said, that person in the picture is not a 13-year-old girl. That is actually a 33-year-old woman called Barbara Skrylova. And the police initially were really taken aback. They were like, is this really a 33-year-old woman? And after digging a little deeper, they were able to check the DNA that they had on file for this Anna, which was obviously that other 13-year-old girl, if you remember. And they checked this DNA for Anna with DNA that they somehow managed to obtain for Barbara. And this is when the truth was revealed. It was finally revealed that the identity, Anna Mauerova, was a fake identity. That this young girl was actually a woman called Barbara Skrylova. So the police went public with this information that they were looking for this 33-year-old woman, Barbara. The police also revealed quite a few details of the case about the child abuse, about the cult, and how Barbara had pretended to be an orphan and tried to get adopted and stuff. And the public were fascinated because it does just seem like one of those cases, like, how can this be real? In fact, one of the main newspapers in the Czech Republic offered up a reward for any information on Barbara, but Barbara was still nowhere to be seen. It was literally like she had just disappeared off the face of the earth, and the case goes completely cold. No one had any idea where she was. And unbelievably, 7 months go by. 7 months go by and no one knows where Barbara is. However, things were going to finally catch up to Barbara, thank God. Because now we get to the final big shocking twist of this case. Because where was Barbara? Where was Barbara? Well, it turns out that Barbara was in Norway. And was she going by the name Barbara? No, of course she wasn't. Barbara was actually going by the name Adam. And this time in Norway, she was pretending to be a 13-year-old boy. Yes, Barbara is up to her same tricks again. So it turns out Barbara, just after she escaped from the children's shelter, before some of the cult members were arrested, she managed to track them down and she managed to obtain a passport for a 13-year-old boy called Adam. And Barbara started assuming the identity of the 13-year-old boy called Adam. Barbara was escorted onto a plane to Norway by cult members, and once she was in Norway, she enrolled into a boarding school where she would remain for the next 7 months, posing as 13-year-old Adam. And unbelievably, Barbara posing as Adam, she got away with it. There were a few people that had some suspicions at the boarding school. People also thought that she seemed way too mature for her age, but she got away with it. But eventually, after 7 months, the school became concerned about Adam's behavior. So they decided to do a little bit more digging, but as soon as they did, Adam, aka Barbara, disappeared from the school. The police were notified, then a huge search was carried out to try and find Adam. You really cannot make this stuff up. A picture of Adam was circulating everywhere, and finally Adam was found in the north of the country. And once Adam was taken into custody, Adam's real identity of Barbara Skrylova was finally revealed. And Adam, aka Barbara Skrylova, was finally deported back to the Czech Republic. And it's just like, what the hell? What the actual hell? What the bloody hell? So now everyone is in custody that needs to be in custody, thank God. So the case finally went to trial. And unbelievably, Barbara showed up to trial holding onto a teddy bear and clutching a children's book. So at the trial, both Clara and Katarina were facing both child abuse and child torture charges. Barbara was also facing child abuse charges, and she was also facing other charges relating to her fake identities. Also at the trial were the other 3 evil cult members that were at the cottage. And as for Barbara's dad, Josef, the leader of the cult, well, he ran off. He still has not been found to this very day. So the trial went ahead, and it was discovered that Barbara had no mental health conditions. But there was no mental health condition that could explain why she had done what she had done. All the fake identities, all of the trying to get adopted, but also the child abuse. Nothing could explain anything. It's just so baffling. This is one of those cases where I just don't have a clue what the motivating factor was, why someone has done what they have. I always try and give you my analysis and my thoughts, theories, and opinions, but when it comes to this case, I literally have none. Clara and Katarina were also found competent to stand trial. And when Clara took the stand, she broke down crying, which kind of annoys me. It does. It's like, you did this? And Clara didn't take any responsibility herself. She actually just tried to blame everyone else. And it's just like, oh my God, take some responsibility for your own actions. She tried to say that she was manipulated by Barbara, by Katarina, by the fake doctor, by the cult members. She said that she felt really sorry for what she had done and that she was just trying to do the best for her two boys. But when Katarina took the stand, she actually started to defend Barbara for some strange reason. Katarina is another one that I just cannot wrap my head around. What was her motivating factor? Why was she literally so obsessed with Barbara? Katarina blamed everything on her sister Clara, at which point Clara literally stood up in the middle of the trial and started shouting abuse at her sister. And then finally Barbara took the stand, and you know what she's like. She took on the childlike persona and she portrayed that she was this innocent young child. I don't know if she said she was a child, but she definitely was trying to make out that she was this young innocent person, that she didn't do anything wrong. Barbara on the stand in the trial tried to say that Jakob and Andre were the problem, that they bullied her. Barbara on the stand said that Andre and Jakob deserved the treatment that they got. I have no words. I have no words. After the testimonies, all three, Barbara, Clara, and Katarina, along with the three other cult members, were found guilty on all charges. So you would think justice has been served. Finally. No, unfortunately not. Just wait. I'm going to read out the prison sentences that they all got. It's unbelievable how lenient these sentences were. So the three cult members, they were sentenced to 7 years each. 7 years. 7 years for child abuse and torture. Clara was sentenced to 9 years. 9 years for the torture and abuse and neglect of her own two children. 9 years. Katarina was sentenced to 10 years in prison, and she received 1 extra year than her sister due to the fact that Katarina was a big player in the manipulation of Clara. But still, 10 years. 10 years. This case, the torture and abuse that I have spoken about in this case is some of the worst I have ever spoken about. And these sentences are ridiculous. And then finally, and this is the most annoying part, Barbara Skrylova was only sentenced to 5 years in prison. That makes me so angry. I feel like Barbara was the main perpetrator in today's case. You could argue that possibly Clara was, but in my mind, Barbara is the main perpetrator. She is the whole reason that this happened. She is the mastermind. She was the one manipulating everyone. And how the hell did she get away with the shortest sentence? And given the fact that this trial, it all came out 15 years ago, every single one of those defendants have been released. All 6 of those defendants are now free and they are walking around, walking the streets, living their life. Oh my God, I am angry. Are you angry? Yeah, me too. How is it fair that all 6 of those people get to walk around and live their lives, but Jakob and Andre, due to what happened to them, they will never be free of what happened? How is that fair? How? Barbara was released in 2012. She changed her identity. Of course she did. And she is apparently living off a disability pension in an unknown location. Clara was released in 2013 and she no longer has custodial rights over her children. thankfully. And Katarina was released in 2014 and not much is actually known about her. And that was the case of the Mauerova family, which, wow, that has to be one of the worst cases I think I've ever covered. And like I said, I don't have any analysis for you. I truly don't know why this happened. The only thing that I can come up with for Barbara is that she was looking for a parental figure and she was looking for attention. And why did Clara go along with it all? Why did she abuse and torture her own children? And when it comes to Katarina, I have no idea what her motivation was. And when it comes to the cult, what were they getting out of this? Well, there have been some rumors and speculation as to the motivations for the cult. And the theory is that the torture of the two boys, because everything was filmed, it was put on the dark web for money, for other creeps and predators to watch and possibly participate in the abuse and torture. And the dark web, none of us want to think about that because unfortunately things like that, selling children, selling videos, those things do happen. And there is no evidence to back up this, that the cult were doing this to sell this footage to other predators online. Authorities think that the cameras that were set up in the cottage and also the cupboard under the stairs were purely just for surveillance. But I suppose we will never know. And I want to end this video focusing on the victims of today's case, Jakob and Andre. After the trial, the boys continued to be cared for by the authorities. They were placed in the custody of their grandparents, and they also started to see their dad more and more, which is amazing. They started attending school. They did undergo a lot of treatment and a lot of therapy, and it is said that the boys did make a good recovery. However, as expected, the psychological effects of what they went through will be with them for the rest of their lives. As they grew older, the two boys did make the decision to start visiting their mom in prison. And then in 2013, when Clara was released, 15-year-old Jakob and 13-year-old Andre did reconnect with their mom to try and have some sort of relationship with her. And I don't know how that will work out, I don't know, but all I want is the best for Andre and Jakob. And if they want to try and have some sort of relationship with their mom, I really hope that it works out for them. And I just really hope that they do recover as best as they can. And I really hope that they have a bright and happy future ahead of them. And that brings us to the end of today's case, which was a very complex, very confusing case. I really don't know how I got through that. Feeling so rough. Thank you for bearing with me in today's video. I was probably not as coherent as I normally am, so thank you. As always, let me know your thoughts, theories, and opinions on today's case, and don't forget to leave me your case suggestions in the comments down below because I always want to know what you want to hear next. Thank you again to Magellan TV for sponsoring today's video, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye.